So I don't know if you watch wrestling, right? But I love wrestling. I think wrestling is basically comic books, except live. Basically the only commercially viable current sort of medium of performance art. I love wrestling. However, the primary wrestling company, WWE, which I briefly worked for as a consultant, they kind of have an interesting business model because their entire creative vision is centered around the whims of one person named Vince McMahon. And it's been this way for 35 years, 30 years, really. And in these 30 years, the WWF became the WWE, and it grew to basically eat all of its competition. So it's this weird environment where, there's anti-monopoly laws in America, but for about 20 years, Vince McMahon effectively had a monopoly on everything. And Vince McMahon is a larger-than-life person who both in real life is a wild man and portrays a wild character on television, evil version of himself, that many people say isn't that far from the truth. A lot of complicated stories about this guy, but that's not really the point. I want to talk about Vince McMahon and WandaVision. In the 90s, there was a wrestling company that emerged called WCW. This company, WCW, got a bunch of big WWE stars to come over. And the WWE stars in the 90s turned WCW into a legitimate threat. But creative problems and corporate backstabbing and really mismanaged stories, plotline writing, characters, technical problems. I mean, you can't stop listing all the things WCW eventually did wrong. But what matters, and all you really need to know to understand what I'm saying, is that at the end of the day, they were bought outright by WWF. Now, this was crazy. This was literally like if Marvel bought DC. Suddenly, all of these iconic cartoon characters from WCW would be coming back into the fold of the WWE. Everybody would be fighting each other. This was a dream. What happened next is hard to describe, and it's so depressing. So first of all, none of the really big stars from WCW even came over in the initial buy-in. WCW went off the air, even though it was broadcasting live opposite Monday Night Raw. There was this really cool thing where characters from the other shows appeared on the shows simultaneously, and you could cut between them. It was nuts. Spider-Man was in the Justice League. How's this all gonna turn out? Well, the answer is really terribly, because Vince McMahon, on some level, seemed to psychologically not want to ever put the WCW guys on the same level as the WWE guys. And there was this really weird feeling that the WCW guys were being brought in to essentially be made fun of. Their biggest stars were giving characters and storylines that were just fucking embarrassing, and they were defeated repeatedly. Eventually, when WCW actually had its bigger stars come in later, when they were brought in with bigger money contracts, eventually they were defeated and embarrassed too. It's bizarre to think about, because you'd think to make money, Vince would be like, this is an incredible opportunity. Instead, for what seemed like a personal grudge, he took this dream of something really cool happening and he rubbed it in our face that it wasn't that cool. So, WandaVision, right? Like, I'm not a critic. I don't want to criticize WandaVision artistically. I thought it had brilliant things. I thought there were really weak things in it. One part of it left, oh God, a really bad taste in my mouth. And I may be proven wrong. I hope to be proven wrong. But when Quicksilver showed up at the door and then was revealed to just be an actor and not actually an important part of the plot, that felt like WWF letting me know that WCW is over. That actor playing Quicksilver has a lot of goodwill that you just willfully manipulated. Like it wasn't even a joke. It wasn't even a thing. You literally went, hey, we know you like Quicksilver. Fuck you. That's not him anymore. And yeah, maybe the show didn't do it that aggressive, but when you look at the Marvel characters at Fox, you see WCW in the 90s. You see a series of bad story decisions, mismarketed characters and confusing choices about how to fucking place these movies or interconnect them that never really come together. And then eventually they get eaten by Disney or Marvel or the WWF, the big guys, the real stuff. None of this bullshit James McAvoy, Patrick Stewart stuff. That was all bullshit. Again, you know, I'm not saying that Marvel has a fuck you attitude. I'm not saying that. But that moment, once it was Agatha all along and we weren't in House of M, that's like Triple H, like pedigreeing Booker T at WrestleMania. Famously, there was a storyline that many people make about race because some of the storylines were about race, but the biggest star they got from WCW was a guy named Booker T. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. At this point in his career was as hot as he had been ever. And a WWF guy who was a bad guy and portrayed as a racist beat him cleanly. That to me was Quicksilver at the door, you know? Why'd they do that? Are we going to get an answer? Because if not, like, why the fuck did they do that? Also, excuse me, if White Vision just got all of his memories back, doesn't that mean the only disconnect between Wanda and Vision is like when she was living with Hex Vision, it seemed like they were doing fine. You know, isn't she gonna literally be like, goodbye, Hex Vision, I cry for you, and then go outside and Vision's gonna be like, here I am. Like, what's the vibe? What's the vibe?